If I got another opportunity, 5 words that have been haunting and sticking in the mind of Dan Quinn ever since the 28-3 Super Bowl defeat in which they let the New England Patriots come back and cement Tom Brady's legacy even more. When you're on the mountaintop and you're that close to putting hardware on your finger and you don't get it, and ultimately you lose the team over time because that stench cannot be unstanked. Dan Quinn has been clawing and fighting his way back to getting another opportunity as a head coach in this league. And a guy like myself, I love a good redemption arc. I know people like feel-good stories, heroic stories. My favorite thing about movies and television is a good redemption arc. It's when character development is in full swing. You watch a protagonist or a villain start or become bad and then become good again. You watch the rise and fall and rise again of a character. And we are now in the Dan Quinn redemption arc. Kliff Kingsbury, too. We got 2 coaches in their redemption arcs in DC, and I think they are both set up to succeed here. Redemption is one of the more intriguing storylines when it comes to movie and television. Some of my favorite redemption arcs in TV and movie and film: Darth Vader, Star Wars; Severus Snape, Harry Potter. Yes, I'm a dork. Severus Snape had one of the greatest redemption arcs ever. You went through the entire series thinking he was a bad guy. He hated Harry Potter, and it ultimately turned out he was protecting the boy the entire time. Game of Thrones, Theon Greyjoy and Jaime Lannister. Characters you loved, loved, and hated again. Redemption is the most intriguing aspect of a film or storyline of a head coach, because lots of head coaches in this league didn't thrive until they got their second opportunity. I'm looking at Bill Belichick. I'm looking at Pete Carroll, Don Coryell. The list is very long for guys that had to thrive getting a second opportunity in this league. We throw the word retread around. Andy Reid, the best coach in the league right now, was a retread, but he was good in his first opportunity. But Dan Quinn's first stint as a head coach, his first toe dip into the avenue of head coaching in Atlanta, it started off pretty swell. He didn't see a losing season in his first 3 years there. And he went 8-8, second in the NFC South. He comes over from Seattle as assistant coach of the year and as the brain trust behind the Legion of Boom in Seattle. So he's coming off of Super Bowl victory and crushing Super Bowl defeat, in which his defense did their job to win that Super Bowl, and Russell Wilson threw a pick at the 1-yard line. So he's coming off of 2 Super Bowl trips as the defensive coordinator of the Legion of Boom. And then he gets the head coaching job in Atlanta, goes 8-8 in his first year, no playoffs. Then it gets so real so fast. His second year as head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, they not only win the division at 11-5, Matt Ryan is the MVP of the NFL with a just under 5,000-yard season, 38 touchdown, 7 TD campaign. And the Falcons were clicking and hitting on all cylinders and got to the Super Bowl against GOAT Brady, GOAT Belichick, and the New England Patriots, and had a 28-3 lead midway through the third quarter of said game. And they watched it dwindle and tick away. Brady chopped at that lead until they eventually took the lead and won the game in overtime, 34-28. But the heartbreak doesn't stop there for Dan Quinn's tenure in the Atlanta Falcons. They go 10-6 the next year. That division was so good in 2017. 10-6 was third in the division. They get back to the divisional round of the playoffs. They draw a very good matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the 1 seed, because Carson Wentz put them in position to have home field throughout. So Nick Foles is starting that game because Wentz had the ACL tear. They're playing against a backup quarterback in a divisional round. Everybody is expecting Atlanta, New England, the sequel. the rematch. They get down to the 1 yard line with a chance to punch their ticket to the NFC Championship game against a Case Keenum led Minnesota Vikings team that they would have dogged in the championship round, and it would have been rinse, wash, repeat. Atlanta, New England, round 2 on some Rocky Apollo Creed type shit. But it didn't happen because Matt Ryan was not able to connect with Julio Jones on a pass from the 1 yard line to win the game. Even if he was able to keep his hands on the ball, both feet didn't touch down. They take heartbreak after heartbreak, and I'm not sure you can bounce back from that type of heartbreak back to back. Kyle Shanahan takes a job with the San Francisco 49ers, so he loses his hired gun, his trigger man, his offensive coordinator that helped develop Matt Ryan into the MVP candidate and winner that he was. He had to reshuffle the deck, hired Steve Sarkisian, who ended up taking a college job. So he loses 2 offensive coordinators. Atlanta goes 7-9, 7-9, and then 0-5. Their 0-5 start was their first 0-5 start since the 90s. So he kind of forced Arthur Blank and company's hands. Him and GM Thomas Dimitroff were dismissed after 5 games, and Dan Quinn has been fighting to get his good name back. He goes over to Dallas to become their defensive coordinator. He takes over a unit that was 30th in the league before he touched down in Arlington, Texas. And what did he do there in Dallas? He led a defense that was not only top 5, they led the league in takeaways for 3 years straight. I'm talking about a Dallas defense. When he touched down there the year prior, Washington scored 40 on them on Thanksgiving Day. I was watching Scott Turner run the annexation of Puerto Rico and in his duffel that never existed on a day other than that Thanksgiving. I watched one-legged Alex Smith and Scott Turner put up 40 on Dallas's defense. Dan Quinn touches down in Dallas, number 1 in takeaways. Back-to-back years. They three-peated on it. Top 5 defense. That defense has 2 candidates this year for Defensive Player of the Year. Micah Parsons, who's an absolute dog, would love for him to lure him away here to DC in a couple years if he ever gets to test free agency. Probably won't. And Deron Bland. So Dallas loses their number 1 star corner, Trevon Diggs, who's also led the league in picks since Dan Quinn got there. They lose him early. ACL tear. What do they do to respond to that? They developed Deron Bland into the greatest pick 6 artist in the history of the league because he had more pick 6s than anyone in the history of the league. And he cemented the record versus Washington on Thanksgiving Day this year on an interception off Sam Howell late in the 4th quarter of that game. They whooped our ass. They ate turkey on us early. But then his tenure in Dallas, people like to throw away his entire body of work as the offensive coordinator in Dallas by focusing on how he got his ass whooped by one of his former Padawans, one of his former assistants in Atlanta, Matt LaFleur, who's now the coach of the Green Bay Packers. One of the guys he gave their first big opportunity in this league, who knows Dan very well. He used this intel from the past, and Green Bay tore Dallas ass up in the playoffs. And that stood out like a sore thumb because we're in a very what have you done for me lately society, especially with social media. We throw away entire bodies of work off of your most recent performance. So Atlanta, since they finished on an 0-5 stretch, you forget that he got that team to a Super Bowl and should have got him to another Super Bowl in the following year. And it took over 3 seasons for him to see his first losing season there. But all you pay attention to is the final 5-game stretch. In Dallas, he's made that defense from one of the worst in the league to one of the top 5 dominant units in this league, with one of the league's more dominant players in Micah Parsons. But all we pay attention to as people is he got dogged versus the Green Bay Packers in the playoff game. You want to know why? Because like Kanye West said, in this game, You can never win because they love you, then they hate you, then they love you again. That is the recipe for a redemption arc. When you hear Dan Quinn speak in his press conference, when he says those words, if I get another shot, he took it personally. Like me, when I take L's in huge fashion, it haunts me. I think about it all the time. You got to kind of shake it off, but I have to let it fester. I have to manifest what I would do differently if I'm ever put back in that position again. And Dan Quinn has tirelessly and vigorously clawed his way back to head coaching candidacy. And he got the Washington job. And his opening presser, you can see the synergy and the connection between him and Adam Peters perfectly. They both speak the same football language. And I think he set up for a successful second stint as a head coach here in DC. We have another guy who also is seeking redemption here in DC, Mr. Kliff Kingsbury, the king of failing up, according to everybody, because despite the fact that these were his records in college as a head coach at Texas Tech, 8-5, 4-8, 7-6, 5-7, 6-7, 5-7. Despite being 35-40 as a head coach at Texas Tech, he managed to parlay that into a OC job at USC that he never worked because he got interviewed for the Arizona Cardinals and New York Jets head coaching job. At the time, people were like, how can this guy be a candidate to be a head coach in a league where he's under 500 as a college head coach, and he's worked his way up to be a head coach in the NFL. Got the job there with Kyler Murray, and in 4 seasons as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, he had one winning season. He had one 500 season, one 11-6 season, and then a 5-10, and then a 4-13. So he got young. He had his career married to Kyler Murray when he came into this league. They went 5-10 off rip, 8-8 the second year. That's the growth and the trajectory and the track you need to be on when you draft a quarterback, number 1 overall in the draft. Everything you hear about Kliff Kingsbury is if he can do anything, he can scheme up offense and he can develop a young quarterback. The season they went 11-6 in 2021 was the start of his downfall. I know you say that's the peak. That's the glimmer of success he had in Arizona, but the context matters. Arizona sat at 10-2 in 2021. They were unstoppable on offense, and they looked like one of the favorites to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl that year. But injuries started happening, and teams started to figure out what Kliff was doing. And according to media in Arizona, Kliff Kingsbury's problem was that he didn't really adjust. He didn't counterpunch. He just wanted them to run the system, and he did not want to change his ways. They went from 10-2 to finish in the season 11-6 and out in the wild card round to the division rival Los Angeles Rams. And then after a 4-13 campaign in 2022, he was fired. He was fired, and he was fired after getting an extension that goes through 2027. So he's collecting Arizona Cardinals paychecks for the next 3 seasons. So money ain't no issue for him. So it's hilarious to see that it didn't work out for Las Vegas. And word on the street is Magic Johnson swooped in and said, yeah, I don't know about that Raiders job. I think you like ours a little bit better. I think you'll like the quarterback that we're going to be getting here in a couple months. So Kliff Kingsbury, also on a track for redemption. What went wrong for Kingsbury in Arizona was that him and Kyler's relationship significantly dwindled. Kyler wanted to be coached hard, and Kliff Kingsbury put kid gloves on him. He put training wheels on him, and he coddled him. And Kyler Murray wanted to be cussed out. He wanted to be coached hard. He wanted to be pushed like the best quarterbacks in the league are pushed by their coaches. Kliff Kingsbury coddled him. He enabled him, and he didn't want to do that. So over time, respect was lost between the two, and he ended up losing the locker room. Kliff Kingsbury, as we currently sit here on February 7th, 2024, is more cut out to be a coordinator than a head coach. He didn't know how to wear all the hats of the head coach. He didn't know how to delegate watching the offense, watching the defense, watching the special team. Kliff Kingsbury just wants to lock himself in a room and watch film. They say, I think it was Sam Forte that said, this guy shows up to the premises at 4 a.m. and watches film on his team, on other NFL teams, and all types of college teams. We're talking obscure college teams such as Abilene Christian. He's not just watching the Power 5 schools in the country. He's finding every way to try to get an advantage and innovate his offense, but he actually contradicted himself in Arizona and did not innovate, and teams caught up to his system. But this is a savvy offensive guy. The pairing of Dan Quinn and Kliff Kingsbury under the umbrella of Adam Peters, first-time GM, we got a redemption arc for Dan Quinn and Kliff Kingsbury, and we got a coming-to-age folklore story in Adam Peters. Adam Peters is Simba. He was just looking for his moment to be king, and now he gets to run his own franchise and does not have to answer to anybody else. And I think in culmination, redemption stories are set up to succeed here now that Dan Snyder is out of the picture. Dan Quinn gets to he gets to be a head coach. And like he said, let the main thing be the main thing. I'm a head coach. I'm going to let my coordinators call plays, and I'm going to run the day-to-day CEO of football operations for the team. Adam Peters is going to pick the players, but they're going to put their minds together to do so. But this is Adam Peters' show, and the whole football program belongs to Dan Quinn. And I think him and Kliff Kingsbury here with the second overall pick, with over $70 million in cap space and a ton of impending free agents, I think we're finally on the same page from all levels of the organization to see success happen here in DC. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to hear more, and I cannot wait to see how they fill out the rest of the staff, and I cannot wait to see what the writing on the wall for these redemption arcs for one Dan Quinn and Kliff Kingsbury plays out here in DC. That is all I got for right now. Come on, DQ and AP. Build us a winner here in DC, because ain't nothing I like more than a good redemption arc.